Hey, so I'm going to talk about Stevie. I'm going to start off by showing you some pictures. I don't show a lot of pictures of me as a little boy when I was a little boy. I mean, I have shown this one. This is, oh, that's me in the red right there. This guy right here with those curly hairs. And that's my great grandma. And there's me and my favorite turtle. Some of them are on Facebook. I think my mom threw that turtle away. And that was in Blumcast. Oh. And my grandma even used to call me Stevie. It was when I was 2, and she wrote number 3 on the back of it. And this was in July 27th, Chrissy's birthday. I know she goes by Chris now. And this is me. Well, and they still called me Stevie then. And this was in 1982, and it's number 8. My grandma always numbered photos, and so anyway, Stevie was, well, I think me as Stevie, I think he was afraid of abandonment, almost like he knew he was going to be abandoned all the time. And he was, he was abandoned by his mom, my mom, and abandoned by other people. Except, you know what was funny about me as Stevie? I don't have a lot of those formative memories. Like, I remember certain things, and last night I remembered something like, I was like, don't look at that, like, not, don't look at me, don't look at what I saw. I was like, I don't want to. So, yeah, I was afraid of being abandoned and was really clingy. And that came from so many years of abuse. Physical abuse and sexual abuse and that, and he said things about it, that little boy, Stevie, and he learned how to, like, dig in just be like, well, fine. I wrote that once. I said that I could take more than most. And so he clinged to mother figures a lot, to women. And honestly, they loved him. Because that little boy could touch women's hearts. I mean, just with a smile. And his gentleness. And they knew how much he needed love. That's why, like, so many people wanted to adopt me as Stevie. And it never worked out. Something always happened. Because they were like, he is so wonderful. Why did his mom treat him so poorly? And I know reasons for that, why she did. And I just wanted to say that, Stevie had a lot of fun and a lot of friends. And he wasn't really all that shy as a little boy. I mean, like, in between the ages of, I don't even, my memories of that were probably around the age of 4 till around high school, when they were calling me Stevie. And so, in California, a lot of the fear came from male figures abusing him. And he got over that. And that's how Stevie went from being me as Stevie to Steve being me as accepting of pretty much that can see both sides and that duality. And then moving into Stephen. So Mia Stevie was, yeah, I did cling to women a lot. Or maybe they were drawn to me. Maybe they were just like, look at him. He's so cute. That little boy. And so I told you I cried for him. And I was sitting one day and I was thinking about him. And I thought, oh, I just got to cry for that little boy. I haven't done that for like 30 years, 35 years or something. And I started crying. And that's what got me with Tara. Is Stevie was saying, I want a home, I want a home, I want a home, I want a home. And Tara kept kicking me out of the house. And I told her that. And it doesn't bother me anymore. Stephen is just like, fuck you. Not, you know what I mean? I'm not putting up with shit. That's what he says. And Stevie was, Mia as Stevie, or that I and Stevie was afraid of that. And then he got used to it. So we went to treatment centers and then went home. And then he was like, this isn't going to work. She's going to leave me again. And she did. And then he would go to treatment centers and he'd go home and she's going to do it again. And it happened. I mean, I almost could count the times that I knew when she was going to leave. And so, and I cling to my grandma. Well, she was like the mother figure, the matriarch of the family. And when she died, it was just like, or when her soul left her, it was just like all, And again, I challenge you to prove that it's not true. And then you'll see that you can't. Because it is true. I was there. And it was probably a long time ago. Probably longer than I even know. I challenge you to be honest with Stevie, that I and you and me and you was the me and Steve and you and Steven. And see where that gets you. Maybe that'll get you some more insights and some clarity and some understanding of how that transition phases go. And at one time I was afraid of women because they kept leaving me. And I was like, so I built up this, I didn't actually build up a hatred for them. I had written that once, that my mother was the personification of hatred. And that was not really the case. At the time, it was a feeling that I had. And, feelings come and go. But at that time, I was working on some work that I needed to. And I was writing a lot of Buddhist teachings still as Steve. And so, and then I was like, when I changed my name to Stephen, then I was like, oh, I forgive her. I tried to reach out to her, and I couldn't get a hold of her. And I told you already that I thought all of that was a lie to push me away from her further. So it was really weird. So being a little boy, then with all these women and all these ladies that were looking after me as a little child, I would lay in bed and I would be like, I want just somebody come take me away from all this. As a little boy. I told you I sleptwalked all the time. And I would make up fantastical stories as a little boy. I mean, I was out of this world as Stevie sometimes. I was just like, zzz. And it wasn't easy. And there were men in my life that were really good, like this piano player man. That I mean, he was one of the only men that I could really talk to when I was in treatment. And there were other men in treatment that were like amazing, that were like, this is what you should study, this is what you should learn, this is, these are okay feelings. And sometimes we talked and like we had these groups and it was like, you know, and I know that, it's all in that book that I wrote about, oh, under socialized, overly sexualized. Well, when you grow up like that, and all your friends are older, which all of my friends were, they were not in my same grade until later. That's what happens. And Stevie always identified with older people because he always felt like he was so old. And even back then, they were like, your soul, Stephen, or Stevie, is so old. They could see it even then. And I didn't know what that meant as a little boy. I didn't know. Well, how do you know that when you're little? How do you know? I always felt like I wasn't from there. You know, or like I had special abilities. And that's what was great about Stevie too. As a little boy, he was just like, I had all these special abilities, and it wasn't like I was the only one that had special abilities. But that's what we believed when we were little as kids, that we had special abilities. And a lot of those special ability beliefs came to shield us. We would believe that we could put up force fields around ourselves and be like, we're going to protect ourselves from the hurt that's going around. And we did. We did that. And those beliefs in that, helped Stevie make it through. And I don't want that for anyone or anybody or any other. It was horrible enough for Stevie to go through, and it shouldn't be anything that other people go through. And so I mean, I don't know, there's value in understanding that, like, from an outside perspective. Maybe people have had to walk that life, that, you know, that pain for what others did or what they did to him as a little boy and as a man, and even now. I know I have a belief now, though, that things are going to change really soon. And I see myself and some others living in that house, living outside. Or, I see Stephen with some others. So back to Stevie. I wasn't always that easy in school. And I told you at one time they probably would have diagnosed me with attention deficit disorder, but we had recess and we could play outside. And in those times we had in California, when we grew up in Santa Rosa, they had earthquake drills and sniper drills. So what they were is, if it was an earthquake drill, you had to get underneath your table. And if a sniper drill happened, you had to get underneath your table. So it was kind of funny. We were like, oh, okay, that was interesting times. And going to school. And the schools, like, I swear, we probably didn't have shoes except to go to school in. We probably didn't even wear them to school. We probably just wore them when we got there. Because all we did was run around barefoot, had fun, playing outside all the time. Which was good. And playing with the animals and, in nature, in trees, climbing trees like monkeys. We did. I don't care. We did. It was fun. And making tree forts or bamboo forts. It was fun. And it was scary too. I have to admit that as Stevie, he was a little boy. And I think that innocence in him was just like a magnet for bad people. You know, I can see him right now just kind of glowing, just like, and having like negative energy attracted to him to like, but he made it through that. And you know what? It did, all the talking and treatment and all of that did kind of create walls that he had to break down again. Because they taught me how to be objective about my feelings and dispassionate about them. They're like, well, just talk about it right away and then get it over with. And then it'd be like, oh, I feel better. And then they'd be like, how do you feel about it? And I'd be like, I don't really have any feelings about it anymore. And I'd be like, all right. And that's maybe why people, when I was Steve, were like, be angry, be mad, be vengeful. And it was like, oh, what's the point? That's why Stephen got all that displaced anger and was angry for so long here. Because he was like living Stevie's anger. I know that's kind of complicated and convoluted to think about, but somebody drove it into him or out of him. And he pushed it back, and pulled those pieces that were missing back into his heart. So, besides that, I mean, there were other things that happened in Stevie's life. I mean, I told you how embarrassing it was having to ride the Wilmerstead Hospital bus to school. Who does that to a high schooler? I don't think they do that anymore. It was embarrassing, but I made it. And I always said this. People in Wilmer remember me. They remember me as Stevie, as Steve, and now as Steven. And they remember my family. And it's hard to forget. I mean, I would show you those pictures of the Mohawk, or times when my grandma would take pictures of me without those cut-up holy jeans on. She hated them, but I wore them anyways. And then I don't know if she was trying to like show me what I look like as an adult, and then whether she was trying to shame me or just be like, this is what you look like. And I always said to her, Grandma, it's just hair. Grandma. And she loved me anyways, even though I had crazy hair and wore all black clothes, or, made paisley pants, that Chrissy taught me how to make. And I wore that picture of her, Chrissy, with her hair all. I love her. I do love my sisters. I just had to like put them on hold for now while I dealt with Steve and Stevie and Steven. And they were time. I mean, I could tell you all of the times. I would tell you about. There were good times in California, like going to Disneyland and Knott's Berry Farm. Grandma paid for that trip. Staying at the hotel. And I think I said that before, we had more fun in the hotel hallways than we did at Disneyland. And just running around there. It's crazy how when you're kids, you just really think about being together. And it's not so much about where you are as it is to the togetherness. I know another difficult concept to understand sometimes is it didn't matter where we were as long as we were together. And, so then in high school, Stevie, they still call me Stevie. But it was easy to do that because it was Chrissy, Margie, Davey, Ricky, Stevie. I mean, that's not in the order that it was, but that's. And then, well, John and Katrina, and then my other brother, and then, so on. Um, yeah, in high school, then I studied French, German, and Spanish, and we worked on those early Mac computers. And I wasn't really that good at math. When I do math now, I just make it up. Um, and I have to admit this. I wore a swastika shirt, and I gave it to the Holocaust class. I was kind of a rebel, and I didn't know what I was doing. I was trying to make statements. Either I was trying to make a statement about see how dumb everything is, or make a statement that I didn't know anything about. And then I volunteered, I donated it to the Holocaust class, and I took the class. And that really drove Steve to document, well, his own trauma as a child, document parts of other people's lives where they were being hurt. And he did that time and time again, and he reached out to people as Steve and Steven. He reached out to people and said, I'm here for you. I'm going to tell your story. And I'm going to tell both sides of the story. And like I said, I went to Democratic rallies. I went to Republican rallies. I got hate mail. Well, I probably did get hate mail until they yanked me out of there. But I was on the list, and I got emails about hate groups that were in Minnesota and in around the country. And so I would track them. And then I would decide, do I want to go to that protest? Normally, I just stayed in the DC area to do protests, to take pictures of them. And then there was ones in Minnesota. They would have them in Uptown, at McAllister, at the state capitol. And I wasn't afraid to get both people's perspectives. I never was. Oh, we moved into Steve again. So Stevie. But that's probably why he did it. Because he was like, I saw as a little boy, and I was a punk rocker, goth, and I didn't know what those things meant. And I don't think a lot of people in Wilmer did either. And I remember the Holocaust teacher's name, and I was like, oh, here, why don't you hang this up in the room to show what came into Minnesota? And I don't think people knew that. And there's a picture of me in the library with glasses on, with that shirt on. And I was really ashamed because I was like, I was tortured. And I had always had those past life thoughts about being in one of the camps in Germany. And past lives before that. It was weird. So Stevie, even as a child, he recognized that. Well, he was adolescent. Even as a child, he recognized that he had the insight, like, well, wait a minute. I'm doing something that was done to me, and I have to, I made amends. I was like, here, this needs to be a symbol for what my ignorance was of not knowing at that time. And then I felt bad. And yes, I did document, swastikas on flags. I also documented Jewish people with the Palestinian people as Steve. All of them together saying, we don't want war. And that came from that early childhood experience of, not easy though, to have insights about yourself in different stages of development. And it was hard. And I did feel bad. And like I said, Wilmer at that time was not a very integrated community. It was mainly just Swedes and Norwegians and some Germans and pretty much. It's totally different now. And I, I told you, as Steve, Ty and Vida are really good friends, and that community, that African American community or Black community, or whatever you want to call yourselves. I call us Americans, all of us, since we all live in America, or Minnesotans, and I don't distinguish between. I don't go, oh, I'm a Swedish American. I don't. There's not a box to check on that. And white. Sometimes I'm like, I go so far back, I'm not even sure. And there's not a everything, mutt, whatever. So yeah, Stevie. And funny thing too about Stevie, he had like reddish hair, and it changed. Red, big curls, and it changed. And I know they changed my photos, so I'm not even going to get into that. It was interesting though, watching. I mean, now I can watch myself. I can look at myself back there and watch myself progress through each stage. And if you look back in your life and look at it as a projection, then you can see yourself going through developmental stages. That's not always easy. Sometimes it's frightening. You're like, oh, why didn't I do something different? Then it's because that's where you were going. And so, yeah, it was not always easy. It wasn't. I never said it was, though. I mean, I did say it was easy at one time. But learning those things and looking back on it and then putting it all together, you're like, wow, now look at all that. What does that mean? And then you're like, oh, whoa. Yeah. So that's why I always thought it was really important that you teach children how to communicate early and talk. In those early years when language is being developed, that's when you talk about feelings. That's when you talk about, yes, you're angry. Yes, it goes up and down. Yes, that happens. Yes, you're happy. Then you're angry. Then you're happy. Then you're angry. Yes, that happens. Because children don't have control over their full feelings right away. And so they have spontaneous feelings. And it can change from this to this in a minute. I've seen it. Okay, I'll pick him up. And so it's really hard if you look back on a life and go, well, I wish you would have talked more or been there. And yeah, I know. I do too. Stephen does. Steve does. And Steve didn't know. He was just trying to make it through those hard years, grown-up years. Yeah, and I guess Stevie was. I was really sexual too as when I was little, and maybe that was a way to be like, I need attention as a little boy because I wasn't getting attention. And that's not either right or wrong. That was what I did. And I think people looked at that and said, oh, look at you were. And they didn't really understand that is the reason is because there was so much lack of love in my life as a little boy, as Stevie, that I looked for it in other people. And yes, I was really clingy with women and because I wanted them to love me. And I still love them. And they're like, how can you do that? Yeah, I do. I told Sean that I'll never probably be with anybody else after this. I don't have the energy. And I always say, well, it takes a lot of energy to be in a relationship. And it takes takes a while to get to know Stevie and to be okay with that history of him like being that hurt boy, and then that he grew up, and then it's hard to be like, oh, and then you were Steve. Oh, you were all over the place, and now you're Steven, and you're like, you know, passionate, and like you've changed some of those, inner demons into like ways that no one ever thought you could, you know, right? And it's weird because as the little boy Stevie, I, well, you and me, it was. I mean, I think some of my stuff was spite. I had spite in me, like I'll just smite you, and I will stand up to you and like, you know, take your abuse because I am better. And that wasn't arrogance. That was just like I got used to it. I don't want that for anybody else. I don't. It was hard enough doing it myself. Sometimes I'm like, how in the God's name did I make it? Well, Stevie tried to kill himself several times. I know. And I was saved. I don't know. And so did Steve. He did too. That's because he had this underlying feeling like something was wrong with where he was at. Not with the relationships, but there was something different happening. And so, um, you know, I think I prepared myself for any eventuality in my life. I was so weird, like seeing that now, that thread, that line that just, you know, and at times I was like, I could have exploded, and now I'm like, I'm like, I still, I still have some anger I'm working on, and I think it's still displaced, you know, and I'm trying to like contain it in this capsule or in this energy so it doesn't hurt other people. And that's not easy. It takes a lot of energy to do that, you know. So I still have hair from my first haircut as a little boy, as Stevie, and I had a black eye in that picture. My dad was holding me, and I don't know how I got it. And most of it, I don't know. My dad really, I wanted to live with him, but I wanted my mom more. And I wanted my grandma. And that's because men hurt me as a little boy. And that's what I did. And you can look at that now. I can look at that now, or you can, Stephen, and think, maybe that saved you. Maybe it didn't. I wouldn't change anything in my life. And I know other people are like, well, we want to try to fix it for you. And it's like, going from Stevie to Steve to Stephen has been a beautiful life. And I don't care about your judgments or what they think. It's been a beautiful life. And I always knew that it was. And oh, yeah, I struggle with it. I make things difficult for myself. And I get these feelings now, like, you know, like something else is going to happen. I'm just, I'm not worried, you know. I got rid of the last fear that I had today about lies. And so that's gone. Yeah. And I asked myself a question last night, and I said no. I said no. And I don't think that was the answer that other people were expecting. I don't know what to do about that. But I said no. All right, so getting back to Stevie. Yeah, me and you and I as Stevie. It's strange how I remember mostly the bad things from my childhood. They were good things. And this is another thing that'll get you. Maybe a lot of what happened was we spent so much time talking about all the bad times and not the good times that's what stuck in my mind. What I challenged, like when I was seeing Randy, this therapist, as Steven, I challenged him to be like, I'm not here to talk about the bad stuff. I live that. Let's talk about the good stuff. And he was like, okay. And then I was like, Randy, did you update that treatment plan? And he was like, no. And I'm like, well, haven't you seen any progress? And he was like, well, we usually don't update them. And I'm like, well, then how do you show progress? And I had a long argument with him. I mean, we were like professionals. Like I was like his colleague. And I was like, Randy, come on, man. This isn't school. This is life. Update those progress notes and those care plans or those treatment plans. You got to show progression. I think, and he did understand what I said. Then he was like, "Oh, I get you." You know, and I wanted to change that too about starting off talking about. And I know I've talked a lot about hurt and pain and stuff, and that's this cathartic experience. And then changing it into let's talk about things that are good. And I can't do that until I get rid of this stuff that is still, you know, stirring. And I need to do that, you know. Stevie didn't. He would have been just like, you know, I can't be that little boy because little boys, um, no, I could, I guess. I don't know. That's what you want me to be, this crazy little boy. um, yeah. Defiant, though. I was defiant. And that's all right. I mean, that was all right as a child. Because I didn't understand because no one was being truthful as a little boy. As a child, they didn't tell the truth. And I had said this once when I was looking through my records. I said, if they would have just told me that my mom was no good for me, it would have stuck in my memory. Instead, I had to find out 35 years later that she was no good for me. And I still forgive her. So, you know, I take that power away from her. I took that power away from her and that anger by one, forgiving her, and by two, just acknowledging that other people saw that at an early age when Stevie needed them, and then they kept sending him back to her, even though they said, not good for him. So, different, huh? I know, right? How do you do that? How do you go from this to this to this and forgive all the way along the line and not be afraid of people's condemnation of your forgiveness? I don't know. I don't know. I think I have a couple ideas. I know. I sometimes think, if these choices I have in my head, what would you do? What would you do? And I would say the choice is theirs. I made my choices in my life. And if they want to follow in their own spheres, you know, if they want to be adults and grow up as productive people, then they can say, yes, it was our fault. And we didn't know. And we thought you were different. And we were trying to hurt you because we thought you were somebody different. And we've spent years and a long time carrying around all this hurt and pain that was somebody else's. And then we didn't understand the whole story about your beauty and your chaos. You should see inside my mind sometimes. You don't want to. Don't do that, because it's like, it's not easy. And well, okay, so I'm just going to finish up with Stephen again. I don't know. I sometimes think Stephen is beyond himself at times sometimes when I'm talking, I think I'm behind myself, or above myself, or besides myself, you know. And so tomorrow I'm talking to this court, people. I know, it's me. I know. I never needed court, but I'll go through with it because I think somebody else does. And I'll be there for them while they try me. And this will be my only witness. And there isn't any kind of hurt or pain. I've freed myself from all of it. And if you're working on some steps from your childhood into development, if you can come to terms with some of that stuff in time, and I hope you do, that I hope others do, or if you need to reach out and ask me as Stephen for some help and guidance, I'll be here. In fact, I talked to Sean about setting up a group, initially a small group, that we could sit around and talk with no agenda about, whatever, just anything. Sometimes it's the little talks that are the most helpful. And it's sometimes people need sometimes just talking about, well, that's another topic, and I'll get to it at another time. I know, right? So much for not talking about stuff anymore. I'm almost done. So, I love you.